Good morning and welcome everybody to today's webinar. It is the beginning of a new month. Happy October. Fall is finally here. Good luck to any of you who might be working on closing the month-end books today. And then also good luck to any sellers out there. It's the beginning of the last month of the quarter. So looking forward to today's discussion as it definitely is applicable to everybody in RevOps. Thank you again for being here. Today's webinar is going to be about the unified RevOps engine, powering quote to revenue with Salesforce Revenue Cloud and RightRev to meet evolving monetization needs. Just a quick housekeeping before we get started. Please submit any questions in the Q&A. We will try to get around to addressing those at the end. There is also a resource available for download if you're interested in taking a look at that. And then just a quick safe harbor statement. We are on camera today with a public company, so nothing that we say should be used as investment advice nor a commitment to a product roadmap. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce today's panelists. My name is Alyssa. I'm on the marketing team at RightRev. I also have the pleasure of being joined by Meredith Schmidt, Executive Vice President of Salesforce Revenue Cloud. Meredith has been with Salesforce for quite some time. She has seen the iteration of the product develop over time, starting with, Salesforce CPQ and seeing it evolve into the more mature product that it is today with the recent introduction of Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Revenue Cloud Advanced, and we'll get into that here soon. What I find interesting about Meredith's background is she was actually, she started out in revenue. So she was a revenue accountant back in the day. So she completely understands how the upstream data impacts all of the downstream processes and how all of that works. So her knowledge there is definitely embedded within the product architecture over at Salesforce. We also have with us today Jagan Reddy. He is the CEO and founder of RightRev. Jagan is renowned in the revenue world. He actually created one of the very first to market revenue automation solutions back in 2009. That was successfully acquired. And then he started RightRev as a 2.0 version to automate revenue recognition. So Meredith and Jagan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into some of the good stuff here. We're starting to see, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a hot take, but maybe the end of static pricing is coming to an end and the age of change is upon us, right? Now, I'm not saying that's true for every company, but what we're starting to see, especially in SaaS, is companies adopt more mature, more modern ways to price and package their solutions as a way to keep up. So we're seeing this fundamental shift in how they monetize. We're noticing many changes across the ecosystem. So Meredith, maybe let's start with, what's your take? What's causing this change?
Well, I think the big emergence is really around consumption, right? And I think that every company is jumping on the bandwagon, and we saw this coming, really. But I think that there's really four key mandates that are challenging revenue leaders. And when we talk about revenue leaders, this is not just finance. This is finance. This is your sellers, your sales team, IT, right? Your customer success teams, right? Everybody in every department across a company touches revenue, right? Revenue is really this uniting process actually across companies. But the mandates, right? It's all about increasing seller efficiency, and not just seller, but really everybody in that value chain. And we just talked about these new revenue streams. Subscriptions have always been around, but now there's combinations, subscriptions plus consumption, right? And then these are challenges, and how do you update your systems to actually be able to quickly go to market and price fast and adapt your products, right? And of course, there's all sorts of economics uncertainty, whether it's competitors, tariffs, right? There's a lot coming at us every day.
Right. I think one of the biggest reasons too, and we just saw this the other day, one of our customers asked us, "Oh, can you charge me this way? Can I pay for your solution in this manner?" And so we're starting to see that this change is largely driven by customers wanting to buy on their terms. Can you elaborate on what that looks like in practice?
Buying on their terms. I think deals are getting more creative, right? They're not cookie cutter anymore. And I think, it back, when I started at Salesforce 20 years ago, you bought a subscription, you paid, annually for per user per month, right? They're really looking at how do I ramp my deals, right? Which is gets really complex, right? How do I ramp consumption and usage, right? Customers were asking for pay as you go. Those were easy. That was the easy model, right? Of I can bill you, you use something, and I charge you in arrears, right? Uh, but procurement departments, right? They want locked in pricing, right? So can I do a commitment and draw down from that, right? We've got the introduction of tokens, right? When you think about all of the AI out there, right? How do you uh, on the hyperscalers and how they price. So you're starting to see buyers, right, who work with various companies who expect that flexibility regardless of who they're working with, right? So they're actually coming to us and saying, I want to buy this way, whether it's through a direct channel or even through self-service or through the product itself.
Right. And I think as a way to remain competitive, get the deal done, sales wants to do whatever, possible to be able to say yes to the customer. You want to buy in that manner, you want to buy in that fashion. I want to be able to say yes to you. And on the back end, the finance teams are trying to wrangle with how am I going to account for that? How do I make sure that our revenue remains predictable? Because a lot of times with subscriptions and the SaaS, everybody liked the predictability of it. But with these more creative and innovative monetization strategies, it's creating a little bit less predictability. But we still want to be able to go to market and say, yes, we can offer our product, we can bundle it in this or that manner. We want to be able to say yes to the consumers. So, Jagan, how is this shift creating a new challenge for the RevOps and the finance team on the back end to make sense of this all, to reconcile it all?
Yeah, I think one side, if you really see like the customers needs a lot of flexibility in how they buy products, right? In fact, I want to take a little bit different angle to say on the other side, there's a lot of regulations coming in to standardize um, contract terms and everything, right? Like contract terms mostly has been tied to every business and the customer, how they negotiate, how they price, package, and everything. But we are seeing slowly where the regulations are forcing certain contract terms as well. I'm not sure how many of you have learned this new regulation that came out in the EU where you cannot force customer anymore into multi-year contracts. They should be easily be able to get out of their long-term contracts. So what that means is your term contracts are almost gone. Like customer can still sign up for 1 year, but they are allowed to cancel the contract without any commitment, long-term commitments into it, right? So one side we are seeing um, customers are putting pressure in the way they buy and how you package and price. On the other side, the regulation is kind of compressing. Now, how does your internal processes and tools can help handle both sides of the needs, right? So that's where a, an amazing background, your back office processes or even a front office processes needs to be flexible enough to meet all these different requirements coming in. I will be adding more flavor to how Salesforce and RightRev is solving all this in the later part of the session today. But this is the most important thing. How do you handle both ends, the customer and the regulations? So you are still selling the product to the customer the way they need, and then you're meeting the compliances.
Yeah. So let's maybe start with what you need to consider first, right? You mentioned there's regulatory changes that are impacting how contracts are structured. Maybe companies are moving from PLG to SLG or doing a combination of both PLG and SLG. In SaaS, we're also seeing, standard subscriptions being layered on with AI capabilities that are largely charged by usage or consumption. So there's, a lot of changes here. If you're considering some of those changes, where do you need to start with, your path to considering like where, what do I need to consider as I'm making some of these changes? Maybe Meredith, I'll start with you.
Well, it's ultimately it's all about the data and how does your data pass from stage to stage, right? And you think about the life cycle. People often call it quote to cash. I used to call it quote to revenue. Really, it's about product, right? It starts with product and how you set your products up, right? The flexibility in your products, right? And so it's really about how do you sell? How do you enable your sellers to sell, right? And I truly believe, right, behind a product lives a lot of data. The seller may never see all this data, but it's got RevRec data in it. It's got GL accounting information in it. And you think about, you want to capture this data once and tell it what to do. So I really think when you look at that value chain, because when you look across product to revenue, I'll call it today, there's like 30 personas you touch, right? There are a lot of people, and this is what we talked about earlier, revenue leaders, right? Whether you're in product and pricing operations, setting up and maintaining your catalogs and your pricing engine, right? How does that then get added to a quote? You've got to sell something, right? And again, selling creatively. Well, I wouldn't say we say yes to everything because my rev rec person in me would say no sales. You can't do it every way you want to do it. There are some rules that you have to adhere to because revenue recognition is actually really important. But I think there's tools, right? You guide your sellers into what they can and can't do, right? You want to offer all that flexibility, but again, it's that data, right? So you go from a product gets added to a quote, right? Gets turned into an order. You've got to process the order, meaning you've got to bill it, you've got to rev rec it, you've got to pay commissions on it, you've got to deliver it, of course. But all of those things is using that fundamentally the same data that you're capturing, right? So you're capturing that data once and it's just feeding and doing automation, amazing things with AI now, but how does it get all the way to the GL, right? All the way to your RevRec tool, to the GL, to your billing tool, to the GL, right? And so it really is, you know, how do you design process and policy with a data model underneath it that allows you to drive automation, scale, and compliance?
Hmm. So think about all the data, right, that you're going to be dealing with, all the different touch points that that data has to flow through so that it, shows up in your GL accordingly. But before we get there, there's this sort of messy middle. There's all these touch points within quote to cash that data has to touch and flow through. So how are companies sort of starting to rethink their entire quote to cash process before it gets into the GL, to kind of make sure that all of this lines up accordingly?
Yes, so this is my favorite slide I've created in the last probably 6 months because it really shows, like you said, the messy middle. And I think this is what so many companies are grappling with is point solutions out there. We've kind of cobbled together, there's spreadsheets. People are still doing revenue on spreadsheets, right? Of course. Um, but all of this disconnected tools, right, have risk, right? Revenue leakage. Am I actually billing for my renewals properly, right? All of it needs to be connected. And this is really, what we set about with Revenue Cloud. And having run revenue for Salesforce for my first 15 years here prior to coming over into the product, right? I've never logged into our ERP system at Salesforce ever, right? And that's a really important point because we talk about CRM versus ERP. Well, everything you see here when you're quoting, when you're invoicing a customer, right? All of these are customer touch points, right? And you want to know your customer data. You want all that data in one place. If I'm a collector, I want to know that there's $1 million open opportunity because I might actually have a different collections call than I would if there was no open opportunities, right? If I'm a seller, I want to know what assets my customer owns at any given point in time. I don't have to go to somebody in finance to figure this out or try to wade through all the contracts and orders, right? And we really center this around what we call assets. Uh, but you're kind of looking at why CRM? Because that's where your customers are.
Yeah. I think there's two things you kind of mentioned there that I want to touch on. One is ERP. So this is like sort of a fundamental change in how finance teams are used to operating, right? There was this theory that, let's do everything in the GL, let's do everything in the ERP. That's where my source of truth is. But we're starting to find out that the ERP, was made for the requirements of the 90s, right? And now as these creative monetization models are starting to come about, complexity is starting to creep in and surface at each and every touch point. And so you mentioned, there's this change of having it live within the CRM, within a CPQ product, and that innately has some connective tissue within the data so that there's less band-aid fixes, patches, API connections that are set up one time and, having to rebuild custom code. There's just an organic connective tissue within the data so that it all lives there holistically. And then you just share it with your ERP, with the rest of your financials and your reporting.
Right. I would say let your ERP do your accounting for you, right? But run your business with your customer. And I think what's really important too, and we talked about this briefly, which is the rise of consumption, right? As a seller, I need to know where you're at. How much are you using? I need to be able to explain to my customer how much consumption, how are they consuming? What are their patterns, their trends, right? All that data coming back into Salesforce or your CRM, uh, hopefully Salesforce. But you want your sellers, you want the people, your customer service reps, right? Uh, that's a whole channel that we're seeing emerging, right? Which is the ability, because that's a touch point, right? Uh, somebody calling into a customer service rep asking about a bill. Well, guess what? I have, and can you explain how I got charged for this consumption?
Right.
Having that data in one place where those people who are frontline is really important.
Right. Jagan, I know you talk about sometimes how the move from subscription to consumption fundamentally changes how the accounting is done, right? With subscriptions, you can look at the end of the month and there's end of the month processes, but with usage and consumption, it's continuous. It's daily. It's constant. And so how does that play out for the revenue teams that have to make sense of that?
Yeah, so this is where the old tech stack and existing processes will not cut for the new sales motions and product launches we have, right? We've seen businesses who have tried to fit the new sales motions into the existing process and have miserably failed. Um, they fail to deliver operational efficiency. It's going to impact your close processes. Ultimately, it's going to impact your customer satisfaction. So when you put two identical companies, when I say like two different companies selling identical products, and you closely look at their, the entire quote to revenue process, how they price it and they sell it, you are going to see a very different policies and processes both companies have adopted. So it's not going to be like one tech stack or one particular process is going to help, even though they're identical companies, it's not going to help them because it's a competitive landscape. People are pricing and packaging very different. The systems need to help them adopt their use cases and automate this. Um, this is where I always tell customers, just don't look at um, the functionality of the product alone or what you want to automate. Look for who brings in a platform that allows you to make it easy for you to, model your business use cases and achieve higher percentile of automation. And this is where I feel Salesforce bringing in the power of the platform, and then with a new RCA and RCB architecture, I'll add to it to Meredith pretty soon here, and how it's amazingly unique and helping customers. Having the platform play is super important because today when we implement Salesforce and Writer with our customers, what we're seeing is the platform gives the flexibility for the customers to achieve a maximum percentile for their use case automation.
Well, and I think one thing too, Jagan, like that's how do you forecast revenue in this world, right? And I think that's I think the challenge that I talk to a lot of customers about, who are trying to move to a hybrid model, who are traditional SaaS or even one-time purchase moving to SaaS. Like the first kind of wave of this was, hey, I want to go from an on-prem to a SaaS business. How do I change that? Right. I think a lot of us have gone through that and we kind of figured that one out. Well, now you're like, okay, now I got to go to a consumption. What is that going to do to my RPO? Right. How do I, pay compensation? Right. All these things are fundamental shifts in how we've run our business, right? Traditionally with, how you what's your opportunity amount, right? How, again, all the way to the finance teams and, FP&A's teams trying to figure out how to give guidance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In the consumption, well, there are multiple um, pain points we are seeing in the consumption. Well, like you initially talked about pay as you go model. It looks super simple, right? Like pay as you go model, you bill every month, and then it looks like it's the most easiest model that will work. But now in the pay as you go model, there's a flavor of like minimum commits you have, like a monthly commits and everything. Now, when you have this monthly commits, then there's an element of variable consideration comes into play because customers might have overages every month. Now you have to uh, apply variable consideration and either recognize or defer revenue based on that. Now the question comes from our customers are, hey, do you allow to forecast that variable consideration element as well, right? So that if you look at these complexities, it's huge. I mean, the amount of data that you are processing, and on top of this, you need to do this forecast. It's huge. No tool is going to cut through. Spreadsheets are not going to cut through. Even when you go and do some in-house customization to do all this, you're constantly keeping up with all of these changes and everything. So it is a very complex process we're looking at.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing, lots to be considered here. There's lots on the table. And many companies, their approach is to, well, I need to retrofit my processes into my tech stack, right? And work backwards. But if you adopt a modern solution, it allows you to be more forward thinking. Hey, I'm no longer limited by my backend tech stack. My backend tech stack is now the enabler to play around and get creative with the pricing and packaging up front. And even, fathom all these challenges and all these considerations you guys have just described. I know we were talking with one of our customers the other day, and just in the 4 years that we've been working with them, they've changed the way they price and package and discount 5 times in those 4 years, and they need to be that flexible. They need to be that adaptable. So how far out should companies look to ensure that their tech stack can support, new ways to go to market and serve their customers?
You know, I'm not going to put a timeline how far you should look out. The reason is the businesses are dealing with the changes every day, literally every day, right? Um, Now, what you look for is like I said before, a platform plays super important than a tool itself. Because the platform will allow you to continue to help um, automate and model your use cases or your business processes based on how your pricing and packaging is changing every day. So, for example, RightRev is super embedded within the Salesforce platform for the RCA and RCB today. Um, Now, the way we have embedded is like Writer understands every transaction that's happening in Salesforce, how those transactions are created, what are the different data elements, and when this data element changes, how the revenue recognition process should change. We work with Salesforce very closely to understand these transactions, and we have built the tool. So what this allows customers is an easy automation, able to handle all the different use cases when you're going and doing setting up this business processes and automation. You're literally thinking end to end. You're not in silos. You're on a platform. You're looking at the end to end processes and doing it. So the beauty is how these systems are super tightly connected to understand each other and help customers achieve that overall end to end automation.
Right. So now, sort of the solution to everything we were describing, right? Enter Salesforce Revenue Cloud. It was designed to make sense of that messy middle. Walk us through, Meredith, maybe the architecture and the composability that allows you to satisfy all of these needs we just described.
Well, I think that's really the point here is this is a completely and built on this core Salesforce platform. We're no longer a managed package, right? This unlocks scale, performance, but it unlocks flexibility, right? And that's, I think, what Jagan was talking about here. And yes, this is completely, built as a platform, end to end, completely interoperable. There's no integrations you need on the top line right here, right? But it's also composable. And that's a really important point, is you can use parts of it where you want to use parts of it, right? We've built functionality to basically do price procedure modeling, right? I can actually test things out before I deploy, right? What would it do to, and I can model it all the way through revenue recognition, by the way, right? With tools like RightRev, which is really awesome. But it's important here is maybe I want to expose my catalog and pricing on a website, but I don't want to allow customers to buy for whatever reason. You can do that, right? This is composable in that way now. But it also gives you, because it is composable, right? But also interconnected, right? The flexibility is you use what you want where you want it, right? And everything actually centers on asset. And this is a really important part of Revenue Cloud today, which is asset lifecycle management, right? Of course, we do one-time products, but with subscriptions and consumption, those are assets that a company owns, right? Or that you've sold to a customer. And how do you manage the life cycle of that asset? Because it's ever changing, right? And how does that then interact with your revenue recognition tools, right? Because you're going to do amendments, you're going to do renewals, you're going to do upgrades. And how do you keep that in sync, right? But asset is actually set very much the heart of a lot of this architecture is how you think about a new sales rep. You get a new territory at the beginning of the year, you get a new account. You're like, what does my customer own? I have no idea. Well, now you go to an asset view. You see exactly what they own, the history of what they've purchased in the past. You can see basically usage history, right? So you start seeing like what is the customer's footprint? I think that's such a big pain point that we have that you hear from everybody. Or I have too many SKUs,
Yeah.
right? And that's what, the other I love every part of this platform. But the product catalog is so much in the center of this. In an attribute-based catalog, right? We're seeing customers reduce SKUs by 80%, right? You'll take Sales Cloud. We might have 100 versions of a Sales Cloud SKU. Well, that could be one SKU with 100 attributes, right? And so it's just really a fundamentally different way about thinking on the flexibility of this, right? We can, how we bundle products. We have, consumption and management now, right? So uh, within the consumption management, I see exactly what's happening, close to real time, right? So it's just every part of this, again, connected but composable.
Right. And it used to be handoffs, right? These were points when some of this lived in one system, then there was another system that handled another piece, then it was handled to the RevRec team, and each of those touch points create, opportunities for data to be mismanaged, for mistakes to happen. So to your point about being able to see the entire footprint, that just creates so much beauty and alignment between the upstream and downstream. Jagan, maybe what does that mean? That connectivity, those connective fibers that are intertwined in how the product was built. What does that mean? What does that look like for the revenue teams? How much easier does that make them to be able to manage the revenue recognition?
Yeah, like when I talk to prospect customers or partners, one of the big questions that comes out is um, how do you differentiate writer with other players in the market, right? Like why are you different? And I kind of tell them so writer has like provides product in two different platforms. So one is exclusively on the Salesforce platform, and then we have a standalone product we integrate with all other systems out there. So this product where we are embedded into Salesforce platform is super intelligent. I would call it. The reason is, like I talked to you before, it is kind of the transaction aware engine. So that means we have been working with Salesforce very closely to understand every transaction being created, what are the attributes of those transactions, and it can automatically process those transactions in the way that's expected in the revenue process. So for example, if it is a ramp transaction, you have a ramp pricing on an order. There are attributes that dictates what type of order it is, like, and how are the pricing being defined. So writer immediately knows this is the ramp, this is the attributes that coming in, and how I need to do. If you have an evergreen contract, there are attributes in Salesforce which will clearly tell you these are evergreens, and RightRev is built to handle those attributes and easily manage it. And on top of that, the data architecture in RCA and RCB is the magic for how RightRev is working as well. RCA and RCB is like built from ground up with a lot of thoughts going in, and RightRev has contributed to this data architecture in a certain way. Like, we worked with the Salesforce product team to say, these are the attributes we need to make the processes work end to end. And the team was like super, super appreciative of our inputs, and they made sure they captured all these attributes. That's the beauty of the new RCB, where they're not just thinking in silos. Okay, I'm going to create an order, I'm going to invoice the customer, I'm done with it, I don't care about downstream system. They enforce the data attributes to be properly captured, and the attribution of the transaction itself, what type of transaction and what data elements are required, drives the downstream process amazingly well.
Right. So
And we didn't even talk about Agentforce yet in
We-
AI.
we
mean,
haven't- we
this
haven't
is,
gotten-
and I mean, maybe it's coming next, but I think like this is like what I always dreamed of as somebody running revenue operations, right? Like what we have at our fingertips now, the intelligence, the AI. I mean, I was looking at some demos this morning from my team. I'm like, you just built this in what? It is pretty, like, I can't wait for Dreamforce to show people what we've been working on.
We're waiting to look for that as well, Meredith.
yeah.
I think the combination of the platform, and then on top of this Agentforce now sitting on top of all the data that we have from the entire lead to revenue and cash process is a magic that's going to happen.
Right? Because the AI is most powerful with data. And how much transactional data we have, that is such rich data, right? For any customer, right? So any of our customers at Salesforce, we don't see their actual customer data, right? But they've got all their customer data, right? And I just, what you can do and what you can train and learn, and how AI can learn how to optimize transactions, how to suggest the best deal structure. So kind of back to that original question about, I want to sell anything. I actually think, and I said, no, I don't want you to always be able to do that. There are guardrails, but the possibility of not having to use AI with natural language to create a quote, to not have to go in, like I just saw, and I'll give you a little peek into Dreamforce, but one of our Dreamforce demos is going to show with natural language, create me a really complex quote that has subscription, usage, and a ramp on it. That's 3 sentences, and that quote is created for you. I mean, how long would that take in the past? So I just think what we're seeing now, that's just a simple, what we call an employee agent, right? When you're working alongside, the AI is working alongside you, but like we're all seeing this now too, right? It's also going to help you optimize the price for it. How do I optimize this deal? How do I win the deal? It can look at all that transactional data. Hey, if you do a 3-year contract, right, you get a bigger discount. It's just going to get smarter and smarter as the models learn.
Yeah,
Right. And that's all thanks to the continuity of the data, right? The sales team upstream and the finance team downstream are now all speaking the same language, referencing the same contracts, the same data. And so now when you apply AI and agents on top of that, AI has entered the ledger. Like, where does automation and AI collide? And where are the points where it's like, hey, let's leave that to automation, but AI is really good at this piece, and how human feedback comes into the loop. Maybe talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I always say automate before you use AI. Right? If you can automate it, you don't need AI.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jagan.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Within RightRev, we are at the stage where AI doesn't replace judgment in revenue recognition. It's augmenting the accuracy, speed, and auditability. It's super important. And this gives the finance leaders um, faster insight into revenue drivers. But the more important is we don't want any judgment to be happening, um, but we want AI to deliver operational efficiency to the finance leaders. So that's where we are driving down that path. The next stage of the AI in the, at least in the revenue recognition process, what I'm going to talk about is where the system today's judgmental and tomorrow can it be more deterministic is going to be based on building a transaction context awareness system, which is what we already kind of have it in play with RC and RCB today. But how do we extend and make it super robust so it's no more judgmental from a user standpoint?
Yeah, and I think that I sellers are not going to go away, right? So I really think there's the assistive part of selling, right? Like that's the employee agent. Um, but when you think about order processing, right? You get a signed order. Somebody has to today, most companies have a RevRec checklist, right? They've got validations they need to do. Who signed the order? Do I need I might have to type in some information here. I may have to update a field here. Well, a lot of that can now be automated, right? At Salesforce, when I was part of the finance world, we automated 90% of our orders. So once they were signed, nobody touched it at Salesforce, right? That's automation, right? Because I'm just doing validations. Uh, and that's where great tools can go do that for you. But for the 10%, that's where AI and humans come in, right? So if you think about this too, when when you do 1 million orders a year or call it 100,000 orders a year, you're not going to necessarily want to read every single one of them. Your auditors come in and pick a sample, right? But how do you get confidence that you're not going to have a SOX or compliance issue when you're getting audited? And all of it comes down to revenue recognition, right? Can I book this order and recognize the revenue? And so where AI is going to get really interesting here is detecting changes to clauses. Maybe an out clause was added. Hopefully you're using Revenue Cloud, so you know that everything's been approved before it goes to a customer. But still, there's an out clause and an action has to happen, right? Maybe it's extended payment terms, right? But now, right, through your validations and through your automation, you can detect also what would require actions. And your AI can actually suggest actions. It can also read contracts, right? So it can identify clauses and obligations that have to be tracked and monitored. So I think that's where it's going to get really interesting is there's a lot of standard transactions, and that's where the automation plays, right? But these non-standard creative deals that our sellers do, those are the ones that require a set of eyes and compliance, and that's where AI is going to get really good at detecting and helping.
Yeah, and that's where the headaches are, the non-standard contracts. That's where people spend most of their time, and it's the highest risk. But alleviating some of that just opens the door for more strategic work. Hey, let me work on some more impactful areas of the business. Jagan, where do you see AI, having a place on the RevRec side?
This is where we call 20% of your transactions creates the 80% of the operational issues, right? This is where the non-standard kicks in. Like we talked about, um, the sales team wants to sell whatever it takes to sell, right? The customers want to buy with the best price and packaging. So you're not going to avoid these non-standard use cases. Um, from the writer perspective, like I said before, we are still not there to do the more deterministic judgment through AI, but how do we improve the operational efficiency is how can users create some of the AI agents to help them look for these non-standard contracts, go through some of the checklist, right? Like have these checklists have been met on these contracts. So the AI will allow them to say, okay, here is some of the anomalies that we are finding in your contracts, in your revenue recognition pattern for these contracts. and allow it back to the users to make that call, like what you need to do. We are not at there to take an action on them, but it is creating, like once again I said, like operational efficiency for them to know this, upfront, not wait for the month end or month end close to figure out all this. It's like every day, it's a continuous process. AI can surface all these anomalies and kind of guide the users. How can you handle this in a day to day, so that your ultimate goal of one day close is a dream come true. It's simple.
I think you are, and that's exactly what we've been experimenting with in our AI, right? In our journey with Rev Cloud is, always on auditor, right? You're always looking, detecting changes or anomalies or potential issues, right? You're not waiting to run a report at the end of the month and find it, right? And that's a lot of the close process is I'm going to run a report and look for these things. That's way past now, right? This is about every day. I love how you said that because it is an everyday thing. And we've launched some revenue, management intelligence dashboards in our product with Tableau Next, and it's exactly that. It's real time data, right? It's updating on every transaction, and it's giving you trends, right? You can detect there's a margin issue arising in Southern Europe. I always blame Southern Europe, sorry. Um, but there's a margin erosion. What's happening there? Well, maybe you hired a new salesperson, a sales leader who's actually approving way too many discounts. But like there's the macro view, right? Of the AI. And what you'll see a lot at Dreamforce, because it's coming up in 2 weeks, a week and a half. So of course I'm saying this, but the data is just getting smarter. So when you think about how do you interact with these new dashboards, you can have natural language and say, what's going on? I see a margin issue. What happened there? And oh, maybe it was one deal, or like it'll come and surface that data. So you're not going, I call it the hunch. I used to have hunches. I'm like, I think something's wrong. And now I gotta go figure out, can I find a report to figure this out? Right. And, you know, I've always told my team, if it's gonna take you more than a few hours, more than a day, don't do it because it's just a hunch of mine. But now I can have a million hunches a day if I want, and
Yeah, it helps
do
you
and interacting with the data.
it helps you find that needle in the haystack much faster. Um, you're able to work so much faster. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface with the AI capabilities, you know.
I'm
Um,
telling you what I keep seeing every day. We're doing daily stand-ups on some really cool new stuff we're working on. This morning I was absolutely blown away. I'm like, how does that work? And
yeah,
it's just amazing.
yeah. So, Meredith, Salesforce has thousands of customers. You guys probably see so many different iterations and variations of pricing and packaging. There's one I kind of want to zoom into right now, which is this trend, or we're seeing the rise of usage and consumption. Talk to me a little bit more about usage and consumption. Break down how it works in Salesforce Revenue Cloud and how you're meeting your customers' needs there.
Yeah, well, I think, one is there's so many variations of what consumption means. We're working with many customers right now have come to us because this is one of the key things that we wanted to solve when we started building this product 3 years ago was consumption, right? We knew it was coming, right? Whether it's the pay as you go, that's the easy stuff. But what Jagan was saying, there's commitments. Is it a monthly commitment? Is it an annual commitment? Is there a true up, right? Is it overages? Some do true ups on a monthly basis, some do overages on a monthly basis. Um, some do a prepaid commit with a drawdown, right? Some do, so the point is there's so many variations of what does consumption mean to a company. And even when you say there's a monthly commit, people handle it differently. They want to do it differently. And that's jogging what you were just saying too, is although the words are the same, and this is what's really important, and is we have to talk to all of our customers. As we're building product, I'm like, okay, they all said the same words. Go show them what we've built. Is it really the same? And we're finding it's not. And there's little nuances. And so what we've really focused on is one, how can you sell it? How can you negotiate it? Right. So we've got this great, you'll see again at Dreamforce, but the ability to negotiate rates and tiered rates, you know, uh, so there's an overage rate. That's kind of the traditional easy stuff. Uh, but we really turn these into what we call grants, right? So you've got a set of grants. Like we know what you've committed. We know what either your true up. So there's ways we're capturing this data through the sales cycle, right? So we know what type of consumption it is. So we've got that nailed. Then this turns into basically part of our product we call consumption or usage management, right? Where again, you're seeing it on a monthly basis, you know exactly what's happening, right?
Yeah.
You know what's coming through, you're managing these as assets basically, right? And then all the way through billing, of course, right? When do I bill it? Because it's a monthly commit. Do I need to do a true up on my invoice, right? So my monthly commit was $1 million. I can see that we were fed in $500,000 of rated usage, let's say. The invoice has to know, okay, I have to add another line for $500,000 to get to the $1 million commit, right? So there's logic that has to happen every step of the way and back to that connected platform because all the data is there and connected and built to work together. We're automating a lot of that risk that you're not invoicing correctly, the revenue leakage. It's all about setting it up and capturing it at the sell time. And of course, even go further behind that with the product setup, but there's rate cards. People have like, okay, I'm going to rate all these different things differently. How do I consume and get I know when I ingest,
Mhm.
you know, whatever data for a kilowatt, right? It charges against this table. If I ingest data for storage, it charges against this table. Like all of that is all set up end to end in Salesforce.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so that's
on the variations when you talked about it, and you talked about so many different variations, and then this rate card that now there's a rate card for standard consumption and there's a rate card for overage consumption. That
Yep.
also completely changes. In the consumption world, there is what I've seen with our customers are there is rollovers, which is a very big concept in the consumption world, where customer commits for $1 million in a year, but they use only 800K. So then the 200K will roll over to the next term, right? When that rolls over, what happens to the rate between the old contract and the new contract? How do you invoice? How do you recognize the rollover amount? Um, and then when you have multi-element arrangement and you need to do SSP and allocation, the rollover creates a lot of complexity. There are different variations we're seeing. There's one new variation that I've seen, which was like super complex, and I'm happy to say that we have delivered a Gen 2 consumption engine to one of our flagship customer, and they've been using this, where you are selling credits, but now from a revenue recognition standpoint, the recognition happens at the service level, not anymore at the credit level. And we talked about non-standard contract, and guess what is this non-standard contract is? The discounts are different at the service level. It's not even at the credit level. Now, this completely changes the whole dynamic of how you do SSPs, allocations, everything goes down at the service level. It became like super complex. But these are the variations we are seeing every day, and how fast you can adapt and build the product and deliver it to your customer is super important. This is where in-house, somebody building something on their own cannot keep up with all these changes because your business is innovating super fast and delivering new products and prices. And that's where we come in, where we specialize in this, and we kind of say like how fast we can help you do all this. So now with Salesforce having the wonderful platform as a play, you can do a lot of things on the platform. You really don't need to even go and build a new functionality because the platform allows you to do a lot of modeling here.
Yeah, I think with Salesforce, they're enabling a lot of those go-to-market motions, right? Allowing the orchestration to be there, but then and to be able to iterate and experiment with new pricing, packaging, discounting, the complexities that live there. But then also at the end of the day, what does this mean in terms of revenue, right? How are all of these changes impacting my bottom line? And now with Salesforce Revenue Cloud plus RightRev reading the same data, you're able to quickly answer that question to the CFO who's asking, what type of impact are these changes having, right? It's great that I'm able to be agile and adopt very quickly, but like I also just as quickly want to know what this means to my bottom line. And you're able to see that with the revenue recognized in real time, revenue forecasting updated in real time with AI. It's just, a CRO plus CFO sort of dream. Awesome. All right, last question here. Obviously, lots to consider here. We talked about many, many variations of go-to-market motions. Maybe some forward-looking statements, like as you're seeing companies continue to experiment, what do you see as the new trends coming? We've already talked about usage consumption. What's next on the horizon?
I'm just still trying to get my head around AI. I mean, I think it's this. I really think we don't know. I mean, a year ago, we weren't talking about agents. Or maybe a year ago, Dreamforce was September, so I guess we were. But in August of last year, we weren't talking about it. The technology is moving so fast right now. Um, you know, we truly believe, right, conversational interface is, you know, you want to have conversations, whether it's voice, right, written word, you want autonomous coming up. I think we are in a wave that we can't even imagine. And I think that what we're seeing, and I mean, internally, what I see, you know, uh, some of our customers, our partners, and just folks like completely unrelated to Salesforce, what they're doing. I mean, this world is I think it's a really exciting time. It's kind of scary time. Um, and I think, one thing in our business at least is we know it has to be 100% accurate, right? And so I think compliance um, is is should be on the top of everybody's mind, right? Because you're like, okay, how do I know it's not hallucinating? Well, you can't like if you answer a support question incorrectly, it's probably okay, right? Somebody called in and I tried to do this and I maybe you can't get revenue wrong, right? That's at the end of the day is compliance, and I think that there's going to be a big focus, for anything impacting financial numbers around compliance and how do you ensure your AI is compliant. So I think that's coming. Everybody's thinking about it already, but I don't know that we're talking enough about it yet.
Yeah, I think you said it very well. One is how we are looking to use AI as a technology to help our business. But then on the other end, the AI world is driving a lot of different pricing and packaging today. Um, I'm also expecting what kind of regulations is going to come in, right? Like
Exactly.
how to use the AI, data security on AI, and then on top of that, accounting regulations, like what's going to come in. I think these are the things that we need to keep an eye on, and and how quickly can customers adopt and enable their business to continue to grow without adding more operational burden is going to be super important.
Yep, I think you keep mentioning change here, right? A common theme here is there's regulatory change, there's compliance change, the accounting rules change. We just saw some changes in the EU. Business models are changing, and you really have to set yourself up to be adaptable and to stay ahead of that curve. And that starts with an underlying architecture and the infrastructure to support those changes. So I know we just have a few minutes here, so I'm going to wrap up, but there's definitely more to say here. And I think the perfect opportunity to listen to more about Salesforce Revenue Cloud obviously is coming up at Dreamforce. So for those of you who are going to be at Dreamforce, definitely meet us. There's a couple of ways you can find us. One, Meredith is going to be giving the revenue keynote, Transform Quote to Cash with Agentforce on Tuesday. That'll be at the Moscone. That is at 3:30 p.m. And then Jagan and team are also going to be giving a session on revenue recognition by design, build monetization, and RevRec as one to capture more wallet share and never leave money on the table. That is going to be hosted at the Revenue Cloud Lounge at the Spur, just a short block away from the Moscone. That session is on Tuesday, and we will drop the link to register to both of those events in the chat. Jagan, Meredith, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I certainly found it super insightful, and I hope everybody else did too. Again, thank you so much. We hope to see everybody at Dreamforce.